Hello, and thanks for joining me here for another episode of Story Time. Today's story is called The Clock. It is from my collection, Traveling Left of Center and Other Stories. It is an odd story, I have to tell you that. It is. For some reason, I really like this story. More troubling, my children really liked this story when they read it, and they were not adults. But anyways, let me share just an excerpt from The Clock. "Harold," said Margaret, sneaking up behind him and startling him so he lost his place in the Sunday crossword. "How many times do I have to tell you to wind the clock? Do I have to do all your thinking for you?" "Harold," rapping the top of his head where the gray hair had thinned to expose vulnerable pink flesh. "Are you listening to me? Wind the clock!" Harold stirred his 75-year-old body from the safe depths of his easy chair and headed toward the offending timepiece. There would be no rest until the clock was wound and set ticking again. "Yes, Margaret, I'll wind the clock. Although," he ventured, rummaging in the side drawer for the key, "I really think it should be repaired. It never seems to stay running very long." You think," mimicked Margaret, her words tiny thorns unaccompanied by roses. After 55 years together, Harold had stopped searching for flowers. "You're just too lazy to wind it. You don't do anything else, and now you even want to pay somebody to do this for you." Harold climbed onto the low footstool to reach the clock, trying with limited success to ignore her. He had learned long ago not to argue, but just to let her words engulf him. So far, they had always stopped short of drowning him, although sometimes it was awfully close. Then, when her tirade would finally subside, he would have to go outside for a breath of fresh air. "The least you could do around here is drag your useless body out of that damn chair and wind the clock when it runs down." "I wish you'd run down, you old bitch," thought Harold, and then was surprised at the sudden, almost overwhelming hatred that ran through him like lifeblood. Reaching up, he carefully inserted the small brass key into the clock face. As he turned it slowly and methodically, he pictured his wife winding down, her words coming slower and slower until she stopped altogether, and he was granted the welcome absence of sound. "Harold, are you done yet? Why does it always take you so long to finish every little job?" Margaret's voice lashed Harold, jerking him back to reality as his daydream faded. She came up beside him to peer short-sightedly at the clock, which hadn't yet begun to run. "Are you winding it right, Harold?" jabbing him in the side to catch his attention. "You know, you have to turn the key clockwise or it'll stop again." And she poked him once more for emphasis. Harold winced. He wished she wouldn't keep hitting him there. After all these years, his side had become very tender. So that is a short excerpt from The Clock, from Traveling Left of Center and Other Stories. And let's see, where did the clock originate from? Well, to begin with, I did have a clock. I had a wall clock that had to be wound regularly. The thing was, it never did stay ticking very long. There was clearly something wrong with the mechanism, and I didn't want to spend the money to fix it. So instead, what I would do is wind it every time I noticed that it had stopped running, and change the hands so that they were telling the right time again. And I mean, it just became this regular thing. The clock might work for a day, 2 days, maybe a whole week, and then it would stop. And then you would wind it. And maybe it would run, and maybe it wouldn't. So that is the clock part of the story. As for the Harold and Margaret part of the story, I think we've all known somebody, perhaps, if we were being totally honest with ourselves, we might be that person. Somebody not quite as bad as the wife, but at times getting that way. We get frustrated, we get angry, we get tired of telling somebody 100 times, do this, don't do that. And each time we tell them, our voice gets a little sharper, our tone gets a little harsher, maybe a little louder. And it just sets off this chain reaction, That's the case with this couple. Clearly, he has found a way to be able to tolerate his wife. He's found a way to let her words, as he says, wash over him. At the same time, perhaps she too is frustrated because, after all, if he would just do what he's supposed to do when he is supposed to do it, she wouldn't have to keep telling him. Okay, so it's not a case of good guy, bad guy, so much as it is a case of one enabling the other, one allowing the other, one causing the other to react in a certain way. You could make the argument that if she was a little bit nicer, maybe he would pay a little more attention to when the clock had stopped or was getting ready to stop, and he would deal with it before it happened. You could make the argument that if he was a little more ready to defend himself, perhaps she would not be quite as, what word shall we use? Quite as aggressive, quite as nasty. If he stood up for himself once and said, fine, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go take the clock to get fixed. Don't talk to me that way. If just once he would fight back, perhaps that would change the trajectory of the relationship. Who knows? The question becomes, what's going to happen if the clock continues to stop running? If this becomes an ongoing pattern, what happens if this time, no matter what he does, he can't get the clock to start running? Is he approaching his breaking point? First of all, has the clock reached its breaking point? Is he approaching his breaking point? Is she approaching her breaking point? What is going to happen between the two of them? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read the clock to find out. And I like to think it's something like the old Twilight Zone. If you remember the old black and white Twilight Zone episodes. It's a little bit of a different story, and hopefully you will find it intriguing, perhaps surprising. Maybe you'll enjoy it. I don't know. Like I said, my kids did. No accounting for that. But in any case, I do look forward to having you read the clock. Let me know what you think about it. Perhaps read some of the other stories in Traveling Left of Center. And that is today's episode of Storytime, and I look forward to sharing another story with you next time. Something a little different. All my stories are a little bit different. And until then, happy reading. Thank you.